Hi guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And today I was gonna just do a brief typing of the characters from Elementary. So in case you don't know, Elementary is the take on Sherlock Holmes where he's in modern day New York and Watson is a woman. So the thing with the show is the reason I'm doing this typing is simply because Sherlock represents one of those characters who I say is very contradictory, right? The same way as I've said in the Young Justice video of Robin, that there are usually three cases of what happens on television in regard to MBTI. It's either case one, which is rarely the case, that the writers know about MBTI, so they manage to write accurate characters. That rarely happens. Or case two is where they don't know about MBTI, so they take a bunch of characteristics or traits, they bunch them up together, and they're so contradictory they don't make sense. Or three, they are aware of MBTI but still decide to do it anyway. They still decide to be liberal and decide just for the sake of story. They're like, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if we took an INTP but made them like an action hero? Or wouldn't it be interesting if we took like an INFP but also gave them traits of an ESTP? So normally, at best, it's they're mixing the types on purpose. At worst, they're ignorantly mixing the types. In this case, I think they're just ignorantly mixing the types. And then, or basically, at best, they're mixing the types with while knowing about MBTI. At worst, they have no clue what MBTI is. So take Sherlock, for example. In this case, he's clearly an ENTP 7 wing 8. I think the 8 wing is very apparent. So being an Enneagram 7, yes, they do typically struggle with addiction, right? Because they love life and they love adventure and they hate boredom. So taking something like heroin, that would be a lot of Enneagram 7s would probably be the ones to do. Just loving adventure and loving new things and being curious individuals, that's definitely an Enneagram 7. And the 8 wing is very apparent because he's this asshole who only seems to care about himself and getting his own way. So the 8 wing is very apparent, especially ENTPs. ENTPs can definitely be assholes because a lot of them are lawyers, some are politicians. So ENTP 7 wing 8, he definitely fits the description. Like if you ask me, what is the best example you can give of an ENTP 7 wing 8? It is most likely Sherlock Holmes. The other ENTPs I might give an example of is Rick Sanchez. But now Rick Sanchez is an 8 wing 7, not a 7 wing 8, because he's definitely beyond asshole. Like he's, certified asshole for sure. Whereas um, with Sherlock, he's more of an asshole when necessary, right? So the asshole nature of the 8 wing is definitely there, but primarily he is someone who likes to explore. And with the ENTP, it does play into his curiosity that he has about solving a lot of mysteries and getting his own way. Like he's very good at pushing people's buttons and getting his own way. So as I said in other videos, normally your top two functions are they're sort of the functions that you genuinely care about, whereas your bottom two functions are seen more as your strategic functions, meaning you just use the bottom two functions to help you achieve the goals of your top two functions. So when it comes to solving mysteries, he uses his extroverted intuition and introverted thinking, but the FE is just to get his way, right? He just uses it to manipulate people. Like he doesn't really care about people. He just cares about the mystery. So he'll push the buttons and do what he can just so he can get his way, which is why he can't really be any other type. Like, he can't really be an introvert. He's not an introvert and he's not an ISTP. I think some people have said he's an ISTP. But yes, he's definitely an ENTP 7, wing 8, a rational person who doesn't plan things, he improvises things. He has a lot of interests and he still has a lot of sex, right? A lot of sex without commitment. So that shows me an ENTP with at least an 8 wing, because ENTPs would probably have relationships that don't last very, very long. But with an 8 wing, it adds on to the fact that they might really not want to get attached. However, in this case, the only reason he doesn't get attached is because of Irene. So if it wasn't for Irene, possibly he would get attached. But definitely, it's very obvious that he's an ENTP. Everything, the extroversion is there, because ENTPs are sort of ambiverts, the sort of the most introverted extroverts. The rational temperament is there. He's extremely analytical, extremely creative. The perceiving is there because, yeah, he just has a very unorthodox way of dealing with things. The Enneagram 7 part is there as well because he's a crazy party animal, has all these tattoos and is a recovering drug addict. And the 8 wing is definitely there because of how much of an asshole he is. It's just, realistically speaking, ENTPs are terrible with details. So his extra sensory perception seems very high. So in theory, he should be an ESTP 5 wing 6 if you're being very accurate. But that's just what I meant when I said the show, they just jumble up all these types because there is no way an ENTP would be that perceptive. The idea of the MBTI is that people who are extremely detail oriented, there's just no way they can be intuitive and creative, right? So if you look at the 2008 Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr., that was an ISTP, right? That was definitely an ISTP Enneagram 5. But if you look at Sherlock from Elementary, you could say he behaves more like an ENTP. It's just he happens to have very good sensory perception, which is rare. So it's almost as if he has no preference for intuition over sensing, so to speak, which is why I said it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But anyway, Watson, it's obvious she's an ISTJ 1 wing 9 because she's very loyal, she's introverted, she's hardworking, and she's very shy and embarrassed. Every time Sherlock points out something to do with sex, she's very shy about it. So that's sort of how Enneagram ones are, especially the introverted ones. They want to be seen as morally good or clean, or such things are unacceptable to really talk about in society. So she gets really embarrassed and flustered easily about sex. So that's why I would definitely say Enneagram 1, that fear of being corrupted, that fear of being seen as sexually promiscuous, even if she does have sex. So it's pretty obvious. With Captain Gregson, I would say ESFJ, Enneagram 2 and 3, because he's a leader and he's a police officer. So that's definitely an SJ or an NT, but he's a very caring person, right? He cares a lot about his team and he's not forcefully authoritative. Like, he's a leader, but he's not an authoritarian style of leader. He just asserts himself to get the job done. So I would say he's probably a 2 wing 3 or maybe even a 2 wing 1. Uh, Again, wants to be loved but wants to contribute to the community. So he is a very good example of an ESFJ. Because really, the only two types it could be is either an ESFJ or an ESTJ, but he's far too nice to be an ESTJ. He's definitely not an introvert because he enjoys it. Like, he doesn't mind being in charge of other people. Marcus is the one that's an ESTJ. It's just that he works for people, but Marcus doesn't really take shit from anyone and was a bit skeptical of Holmes at first. So he's an ESTJ. His Enneagram type, I'm not sure. He could be either an Enneagram 1, wing 9, or Enneagram 8, wing 9. No, a 1 wing 9 or a 9 wing 8. I don't really think he's an Enneagram 8 or pure Enneagram 8 because he's sort of a nice guy. But yeah, he's a good example of an ESTJ. Moriarty is where it gets interesting, and obviously, this is a bit of spoilers. Traditionally, Moriarty was an INTJ, like in 2008, Sherlock Holmes. But in this case, she was very good at manipulating Sherlock Holmes and very emotionally expressive. Like, she literally seduced, right? She seduced Sherlock, right? Very effectively, and she was, very beautiful and seductive rather than cold and calculating. So I definitely type as an INFJ, sort of like Hitler, because Hitler still had that charisma which he used to lead his people. So yeah, in fact, she at face value, she does look like an ENFP. As I said, spoilers, because Irene Adler does look like an ENFP when she met Sherlock, even only sleeping with him once because she got bored of him and wanted to sleep with other people, but that was all a ploy. So, in terms of a criminal mastermind that's very good at manipulating people, I would say that would be an INFJ. INTJs are more strategic but not as manipulative. So, yeah, I would type her as INFJ, but she could also be an ENFP. But I feel she was just pretending to be an ENFP. I feel that extroverted feelers do have enough energy to pretend to be ENFPs. So, yeah, even the artistic side, both ENFPs and INFJs can be artists. So, yeah, the 8 wing 7 is just, it's probably the only enneagram that would want to be a criminal mastermind. Could also be an Enneagram 3, could be a 3 wing 2, maybe, or 3 wing 4. But I just chose 8 because of the 7 wing, because the 7 wing shows that 8 still do want to have fun and enjoy themselves. Yeah, so that was my view on them. So here we have the personality database, and it types it types Sherlock Holmes as INTP, which is funny. I am INTP, and his FE is just too high. He's just too good at getting his way with people. So he's not an INTP, he's an ENTP. And he's a 7 because of the 8 wing, not a 5 wing 6. I think that's just lazy typing. These other people, I don't really know them. Alfredo Lestrade. Lestrade, I think he was more of seemed more like an ESFP, but I don't really remember that well. Yes, Irene Adler, INFJ, but I would type her more as an Enneagram 5 wing 4. Mycroft, I would actually type Mycroft 100% as an ISFP 3 wing 2 because he opened a restaurant. So that's an artistic career. He opened the restaurant. He wanted, well, I assume he was actually a chef because he wanted to, not just because he works for MI6. So he's a chef, he's successful, and he wants to be loved. He's a very caring person and he cares a lot about Sherlock, but he's sort of gentle and introverted and not very overly assertive. So cooking is sort of an artisan thing. So I would definitely type Mycroft as an ISFP Enneagram 3 wing 2, and a very good example of that. I don't know who Jamie Moriarty is. Yeah, Marcus Bell, ESTJ. 7 wing 6, I don't know about that. I don't see the fun side in him. I would say as I said, nine wing eight, one wing nine. Uh, at most, if you're introducing a seven, I would say I'd literally say anything other than seven wing six. Like I would say seven wing eight or six wing seven, but not seven wing six. Gregson, he's an extrovert and he's a very gentle person. Watson, she's actually a thinker, so she's not very emotional. She's not very emotional at all. I think traditionally, Watson is an ISFJ in other iterations, but not in this one. So yeah, that's all of my typing for the major characters in Sherlock Holmes.